This is Michael Popok with Legal AF. By attacking Nancy Pelosi and calling for her arrest, all Donald Trump is doing is conceding and admitting to the crimes that were committed on January 6th. So he's basically conceding that there were criminal activity that he instigated, then tries to blame Nancy Pelosi for not calling the National Guard in time when it's his sole responsibility as commander-in-chief to call the National Guard. Let me try to untangle this web that Donald Trump has tried to spin over the eyes of the American voter and do it here on this particular hot take. What am I talking about? First of all, Donald Trump, when he's not confusing Nancy Pelosi for Nikki Haley, which he's done during other press conferences. In fact, let's kick it off with the clip of him confusing the two people. He can't even keep straight who he thinks is responsible for the criminal conduct and the siege on the Capitol that he started. Let's roll that clip.
Never reports the crowds, you know. By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, you know, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything, deleted and destroyed all of it, because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people.
Okay, so this is the person that people want to entrust with being the leader of the free world and have his finger on the nuclear button. He can't even get straight. He gets his women strong leaders confused. Now, what in the world is he talking about? Let me put the facts on the table. Donald Trump has now conceded effectively by calling for Nancy Pelosi to be jailed that there has to be a series of crimes that happened on Jan 6th, which is a complete 180 degrees from Donald Trump's inconsistent consistency in arguing that it was just a day in the park. He did nothing wrong. He just gave a speech at the Ellipse. He didn't know that those people were armed. We know that's a lie. He didn't point them in the direction of the Capitol for the siege. We know that's a lie. He didn't call for the hanging or support the hanging of Mike Pence. We know that's a lie. It was just a tour of the Capitol. We all take those occasionally when we're in the DC. That got out of hand. And these are not criminals. These are political prisoners. They are patriots. They are people who we should embrace and love. They are hostages to the weaponized Department of Justice. Well, if that's the case, then what would Nancy Pelosi be indicted for? You can't have it both ways, Donald. You can't have it both ways, you moron. You can't in one hand say that nothing happened. It was a peaceful picnic protest and First Amendment exercise. On the other hand, call for the head of Nancy Pelosi on a pike because she's responsible for what happened on Jan 6th. I'm gonna fix that in a minute and give you the facts about who was responsible, Trump, for the National Guard not being called in time. Who is the only person, Trump, who had the power to call the National Guard? And a comment taken out of context by Nancy Pelosi during an HBO interview with her daughter about the issue. But first, let's go to the video clip of Donald Trump calling for the head on a pike of Nancy Pelosi, who should be a criminal and in jail because of what happened on January 6th. Presupposing that the thing that happened on January 6th was a crime. Let's roll that clip.
And Nancy Pelosi has a little problem because her husband sold their Visa stock. They had a lot of Visa stock one day before Visa was announced that Visa is being sued by the Department of Justice. Think of that. Nancy Pelosi sold vast amounts of Visa stock one day before the big lawsuit that we all read about a few days ago was brought against Visa. You think it was luck? I don't think. She should be prosecuted. Nancy Pelosi should be prosecuted for that. And she should also be prosecuted for J6 because she turned down 10,000 or any number she wanted, soldiers or National Guard. And I hope you all read John Solomon and what John Solomon wrote 2 days ago.
Okay, this is where you have the problem with campaigner-in-chief Donald Trump, criminal-in-chief Donald Trump, indicted defendant Donald Trump, and they can't get their story straight. And really, it's like talking to a teenager who broke curfew and can't get the story straight with their parents. But it's worse because it's Donald Trump, and we're talking about a siege on the Capitol and an attack on our democracy and the cradle of our democracy that hasn't happened since the 1800s when foreign powers invaded. Foreign powers, by the way, is exactly, foreign enemies and enemies are from within, is exactly what Nancy Pelosi called Donald Trump hours during the January 6th siege, that he is an enemy of the people within our own government, and that's how dangerous he is. Let's talk about the National Guard for a minute. Donald Trump likes to point to some HBO footage, outtakes of a documentary that Nancy Pelosi's daughter did about Jan 6 and other things. The reality is this. Nancy Pelosi, like an adult, said that once the siege happened, once the Capitol was about to be burned, once people were roaming the halls of the Capitol, calling for her, literally calling for her head to pull her out by her hair and to hang her, she said, I'm going to take responsibility because there could have been more that was done to protect the Capitol, and that didn't happen. She wasn't talking about the National Guard. She was talking about the sergeant in arms. She was talking about the Capitol Police plan and things like that. But we're talking about after the explosion happened. The question for criminality is who lit the fuse? We know the bomb went off. Everybody knows that there was an attack on the Capitol. And then you have Nancy Pelosi and outmatched Capitol Police, outmatched Metro Police, trying to battle medieval style on the steps of the Capitol to protect the Capitol and hold the line. But what the crime, yes, those were crimes. But it's not a crime to not properly protect yourself from a horde, right? A whipped up horde of people with bloodlust trying to kill elected officials and their staff. That is at the feet of Donald Trump. And the beauty is, as we're awaiting to see and get inside that 180 pages filed by Jack Smith, the beauty of it all is you just had idiot-in-chief Donald Trump admit that the things that happened that day were a crime. He's just trying to distract from it and put the criminal blame on somebody else. Nancy Pelosi or Nikki Haley or whomever he can lay it at the feet of other than himself. But he's admitted to the crimes, that there were crimes. That's the point of this hot take. So you have the clip we just saw of the Nancy Pelosi thing. I'm going to get to the National Guard lie in a minute. Then you got the social media post by Donald Trump, which doubled down on that there were crimes that Nancy Pelosi is responsible for. Let's put them up. Okay. Let's get to the truth here like we do on Legal AF and on the MeidasTouch Network. And on our new Legal AF MTN YouTube channel, free subscribe there. Help us get to 200,000 and you'll see more of this kind of content. Donald Trump lies to the American people and said he called out 10,000, sometimes he says 20,000 National Guards people, and then what? And then it was rejected. It was, are you looking for something simple and delicious to add to your wellness routine? Well, here's the thing. I used to put regular honey into a lot of my foods, breakfast, tea, protein. But then I was introduced to Manakura, and Manakura puts that regular honey to shame. I love the flavor, richness, creaminess, and all the health benefits Manakura honey brings to the table. The best way to use Manakura is straight from the spoon first thing in the morning, letting the creamy texture melt in your mouth and coat your throat. Manakura honey is rich, creamy, and the most delicious honey you've ever had. It's ethically produced by Manakura's master beekeepers in the remote forest of New Zealand. Manakura honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. The bees collect the nectar from the Manuka tea tree in New Zealand. The nectar is packed with bioactives, and the honey that is produced has 3 times more antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey. A special antibacterial compound called MGO also comes from the nectar of the tea tree. Manakura third-party tests every single harvest for MGO and makes these results available through their QR system. It's a game changer. And all you need is 1 heaped teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manuka. Additional usage through the day is completely fine, especially helping to cut out other sweeteners. It's a honey with superpowers. Now it's easier than ever to try Manacora honey. Head to manacora.com/legalAF to get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. He seems to forget he was the commander-in-chief. Everybody who testified for the Department of Defense, the Secretary of the Army, the head of the Capitol Police, the Sergeant at Arms for the House, all said the same thing. All Donald Trump had to do, instead of whatever he was not doing for 3 hours in the dining room in the White House, watching the Capitol burn, fiddling while the Capitol burned, all he had to do was pick up the phone and call the Secretary of Defense, the head of the National Guard, the Secretary of the Army, and cut through the red tape and the confusion that apparently was happening at the Pentagon because they were looking for direction by the commander-in-chief and they weren't getting it because he liked what he saw on television. He told people like Alyssa Griffith, who was near him in the dining room, that Mike Pence was a P word, a pussy, and that he should be hanged, and that he understood why people wanted to do that because he refused to not certify the election for Joe Biden and throw it over to the states in chaos. There was no phone call. We know that from the Jan 6 committee testimony. At his own Secretary of Defense, acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, testified against Donald Trump and said there was never an order from Donald Trump to send any National Guards people, and we needed that authorization. Nancy Pelosi alone, even as the Speaker of the House, does not have independent authority to call the National Guard. She was so desperate, and we know this from the Jan 6 reporting, and the videos of her with Chuck Schumer hiding under their desks, getting whisked away by security forces as people in the hallway who were MAGA Trump lovers, who were encouraged and whipped up by him, sought to kill them. She even tried to reach out to the Virginia National Guard, an independent guard run by the governor of the state of Virginia, to ask him to call out his National Guard at the last minute. All you saw in the clip that Representative Loudermilk, great name, for the MAGA, one of the MAGA House committees, the Oversight Committee, is her being an adult and saying once effectively Donald Trump lit a match, whipped up his followers, fomented that discontent among the angry armed rabble, and pointed them towards the Capitol like a weapon and said, "I'll follow you there," as he headed in the Beast, the SUV, back to the White House. Once that happened, sure, she could have done more. She's living with some regret. Maybe she should have had the Sergeant at Arms do a better plan. Maybe there should have been more coordination in advance so that it wasn't done on the fly with their chickens with their heads cut off, running around, apparently all that indecision and sort of analysis paralysis that was going on at the Pentagon. That's what she's taking responsibility for as an adult, not criminal liability for starting the crime. That's like saying the family inside the house is criminally responsible for the late response by the fire department after Donald Trump, the arson, set the fire and poured gasoline on it and exploded the bomb. The family should be criminally liable. But what you have is the arsonist and Donald Trump admitting that there was a crime. He just can't figure out who did it. It's like when O.J. Simpson used to go on talk shows and radio shows and the predecessors to podcasts and say things like, I'll pay $100,000 to solve the crime of Nicole Brown Simpson's death. I wanted to phone into those shows and say, I've solved it. It's you. And Donald Trump is unfortunately like O.J. Simpson on steroids. And has more ability to harm the American public than just a rampaging O.J. Simpson, and that's the problem. And so this is what we know from the Jan 6 committee. This is what we know from Chris Miller, the acting Secretary of Defense under Donald Trump, is that Donald Trump never gave an order. There was a discussion a couple of days before. At the same time, split screen, Donald Trump was calling for his people to go to the Capitol on Jan 6 particularly, because it's going to be wild. And that was a signal that he sent out, like a perverse bat signal to his followers to go and attack the Capitol. There's no other way to translate it. There's no other way to translate it than that particular announcement after he heard, to back it up further, after he heard from his lawyer Ken Chesborough that Jan 6th was D-Day, and if he didn't do something on Jan 6th, last gasp effort to cling to power, that he would be out. And that motivated him to text that. And those people got together on social media and they coordinated, they crowd-funded this thing, and they got together with Donald Trump as their leader. He never gave the order of 10,000 or 20,000. He never picked up National Guardsmen. Donald Trump never called his National Defense Secretary, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Army, the head of the National Guard. He never called into the Pentagon. He did nothing. We know he did nothing for over 3 hours as he sat in the dining room of the White House. He didn't do anything until 4:17 in the afternoon when he got up and he gave a speech to his masses in which he said, I love you, go home. That was 4:17 after the Capitol had already been under siege for over 4 hours. That's what we know. But if I'm Jack Smith, as part of the evidence, because that's something that Donald Trump never seems to understand. He is creating new evidence on a daily basis that can be scraped by, I'm sure there are social media teams that are dedicated to the Department of Justice and the Special Counsel, and all they do every day is watch, gather, scrape comments made by Donald Trump at rallies, at speeches, in interviews, and on podcasts, and on whatever, and then put that information into an evidence pile to be used against Donald Trump. They're looking for ways to nail Donald Trump and have him admit his criminal intent and mens rea. And the start of that is what we're doing on this hot take, that he is admitting to the crimes. He's just looking the other way, and he can't figure out who started that fire. I don't know, but there was a big fire. Well, there, we all saw it. You know, it's like one of those giant boards in one of those like Homeland or one of those other shows where they have all the potential photos of all the potential assailants, like a family tree, all connected with red string and wire and pins. And there's a giant face in the middle with red circles, Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's like, I can't figure out how it happened. Oh, well, the rest of America can. Jan 6 committee did. Prosecutors in the Department of Justice have. Dozens and dozens of trials and convictions against the Jan 6 defendants says you were responsible. Federal judges have observed that you're responsible. Indictments say that you're responsible, and the courts will prove it, and juries will prove it as soon as we get those trials up and running. We'll continue to follow it all right here on Legal AF and on the MeidasTouch Network. And great news for those that like the intersection of law and politics like this, we have a brand new YouTube channel, Legal AF MTN, at Legal AF MTN for MeidasTouch Network. Go there now. Help us get to 200,000 free subscribers. We're only 10 days old, and we're going to hit 200,000 with your help by early next week, if not the week after. We're already halfway there. Free subscribe if you like what we're doing at the intersection of law and politics. If you know what 40 million people a month already know, that Legal AF is the home for commentary and analysis at the intersection of law and politics like no other, then come join us. Make your journey part of our journey on Legal AF MTN. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF podcast, until my next exclusive content only on the Legal AF MTN channel in collaboration with MeidasTouch, this is Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.